talk about Trump nuking the income tax. As you all know, it's way too much fun trying to game the tax system. Getting rid of it would be a disaster for us rich people. There's all kinds of fun. I'm not going to get into the finer details about all the wonderful things we do, but suffice to say, I live in a 2,000 square foot home with an 8,000 square foot garage, and it has rewarded me handsomely in the fun factor, not necessarily the wealth factor. But seriously though, it seems like a joke. There's no way you can get rid of the income tax. Sure, there was most of our history as a country, we didn't have income tax, but we didn't have a massive war machine or $1 trillion healthcare budget back then either. And that kind of is the clue to how this might work. So it does seem to be likely, believe it or not, according to my insider sources, that this is something that's being taken very seriously. It is not likely to be scrapped in the phase 1 scenario. There's going to be a multiple phase build-up, possibly through the Fair Tax Act. I think the one that's currently going through Congress is called the Fair Act tax that was proposed. It's probably not going to be that one in particular. Originally, when people thought about, well, if we get rid of the income tax, what are we going to pay our debt burden off with? And originally they thought tariffs would do this. Obviously, people who don't have a background in making money through the market or at a macro level would think this. In reality, there's nowhere, even if tariffs did work, there's nowhere near enough money from tariffs to fund the 2.5-ish trillion in tax receipts we would need to replace. And as we've seen anyway, the true purpose is for negotiation. So what we'd see more likely is in a phased approach. The first scenario would see income tax cut by a half or maybe a third initially. It would be wound down. There'd be a winding down series over probably several years. It'd have to be over several tax periods, over several years. The supplement would likely come from cutting, first of all. It would come from cutting in the budget. And the budget would have to be cut dramatically regardless to get that 2.5 trillion. And most of it is gonna come from healthcare, which is about 1.5. And a cut like that would only be possible through tremendous technological advancement, which is on the horizon. All these tech titans talking about experimental vaccine cancer killers, experimental anti-cancer killer, cancer-killing vaccines. You know, no matter how you say it, it sounds suspicious. But anyway, again, this is more likely than you might think. A radical technological revolution in the healthcare industry could shave most of that budget away. Again, a single source of technology that was so profound, so complete that it heals the body, would cut most healthcare costs overnight. There's no other budgetary category that could be so convincingly and comprehensively replaced or eliminated that is more vulnerable to technological change, massive technological change. We're talking about like sci-fi fantasy level. Suffice to say, Ozempic or anti-cancer mRNA vaccines will not push us over the hump on this, but depending on how and this is the subject of another video, this disclosure process goes in Washington, which is the black swan numero uno right now. If you're part of the Never Ever Will I Wage class, then this is a very important topic, because the implication is that the black budget tech deep within the military-industrial complex could surface through this process. And in that world, the deep black world, I can assure you anything is possible. Technology that comes out of that realm could be truly transformative to the tune of trillions of dollars all over the world, and even domestically, depending on whether it's energy or medical. To give you an example, again, it's not like I have friends in all the Phantom Works, the Skunk Works, the Eagle Works, or people who work at all these Wright-Patterson, Area 51 type places. I do, but that's besides the point. Again, one of the possibilities in this anything is possible realm would be a medical revolution in healing. For instance, you could lay on a table of stem cells, get electrocuted, and wake up fully healed at $20 a zap, saving you tens of thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands over the decades in conventional operations. Literally, the budget would disappear. In fact, it might be so cheap it could be offered, especially if it has been held for in the national interest for negative reasons, for unjustified reasons, it could be used at almost no cost at all to the public. Or it could be, again, entirely funded by the public through extremely low cost. Who's not going to pay $10 to be totally healed, or $20 to be totally healed, once a month or something? So the point is, the healthcare industry has to be zapped by black budget technology for that 1.5 trillion to disappear overnight, to clear up enough space for other income sources to replace the income tax receipts, which are in the trillions, 2.5 trillion. And that's where the Sovereign Wealth Fund, which was just signed into existence through executive order, would come in handy. And to fully cover this, we really have to talk another video. But in a nutshell, the US government would essentially capture a portion of market returns, which are, to any objective observer, the best product this country produces, the stock. Only their use of these returns would be used to pay down national debt on a rolling basis, and to potentially release, if there's a really good year, they could release as quarterly dividend checks to patriots, like a patriot check. All citizens of a size, but bigger checks would be reserved for wages and families, essentially people who are productive to the nation. In a post-Federal Reserve world, this would be used as a tool for liquidity and cost of money control. So again, we'll talk about that more in another video. This idea of this almost like a market UBI replacing the Federal Reserve concept to control cost of money is very, very likely, even though it sounds totally outlandish and no economist is talking about it. Most economists are wrong and going to be wrong because they are wages into the future. If you want to know why most of them are wrong, we'll do another video on that, about how the neo-feudal elite control the market and the economy, and economists do not. It's actually very simple. I just described it right there. Okay, now, even with the Sovereign Wealth Fund payday, the returns would be obviously not in the trillions of dollars a year, but they would be in the hundreds of billions, especially with the commodities we will have access to and the exports, again, as we become energy dominant. Then again, in the event that that disclosure scenario results in a transformation in energy technology, the returns might not be as big as people think, so it is a sword that cuts both ways. But anyway, obviously there would still be taxes. Without income tax, there's still going to be taxes, and the Fair Tax Act, which is the first of probably many that are going to be pushed, there's going to be a fee-based burden. Now, it still exists for American citizens, but only when they're acting as consumers. Maybe also on property to some degree. I think that would have to be the case in terms of supporting infrastructure and things like that. Municipals would probably need that kind of support. So there'd still be some property tax, but in terms of, maybe it'll be reduced, I don't know, but in terms of the tax that most people would see on a daily basis, that would be really, really prohibitive, more so than income tax, would be a sales tax, which is through this Fair Tax Act. Maybe there'd be continuing investment taxes, although if you were to move your money into the Sovereign Wealth Fund, potentially, there'd be a Sovereign Wealth Fund associated mutual fund or Social Security type system. Most likely that's how it's going to work. Then you might be able to reduce your investment burden, your investment tax burden and fee burden. But back to the Fair Tax Act would bump the sale tax to a national standard. That's sort of the concept, and it's a fairly high, no pun intended, it's a very unfairly high, 23% flat. Only makes sense in a economy where there is a lot of liquidity and a high demand economy, and a lot of there'd have to be national instruments to induce demand, which is why, again, this tax act includes a proposal for a monthly payment. They're not going to call it the right isn't going to call it a UBI, but it is a UBI, essentially, that would be made to all households based on household size, and it would be known as a prebate, which offsets the regressive nature of the sales tax. Again, this prebate would really not be possible without the Sovereign Wealth Fund, the Patriot Dividend, and that the monthly payment is intended to cover a household's annual consumption up to the federal poverty level, which in other words would be the citizenship dividend in the Sovereign Wealth Fund video, and then be adjusted whether you're working and the size of your family. Again, we can see the nuking the income tax. It's not impossible. It is very improbable without all these other things happening, some of which are black swans, like the disclosure angle, and others, like the Sovereign Wealth Fund, are going to take a lot of work to happen first. and there'd be good years and bad years, so it's not going to be the UBI prebate that people think necessarily. But it's not as delusional as it might have sounded at first glance. And, you know, taxes have never made anyone broke. The solution usually is just to, if you're entrepreneurial, or you have entrepreneurial friends, then you know the solution is often, well, you just pay the ones you absolutely have to and hope for the best on the rest. And if they do come after you, then, you know, you're not poor, you're just broke. Right? Big difference. So we'll definitely return to this topic as it's further developed, because right now it's all very in a theoretical stage. But over the months and potentially the next 2 or 3 years, I think we are going to see a lot of movement on this, on getting rid of the income tax and empowering the wages and all this very disappointing stuff. From the wealthy perspective, it's just an absolute tragedy that the wages would be getting any sort of benefit like this. On the upside, this video is a tax write-off for me, so... Anyway, that's all for now. Remember, sound money equals sound mind. And I will see you on the margins.